Hi, babe. What do you get me for Christmas? I'll tell you what I'm getting you for Christmas. Well, you already know what I'm getting you for Christmas.
I think I already know, yeah. You don't know what I'm getting you, though.
No.
It's pretty good.
Then I have another Christmas present for you, too. If you want it, I give it to you today.
Just hold off on it. You're showering me with gifts.
Okay. I mean, I already gave you today a charger and a...
You did. I mean, you gave me back my tools that I left over here.
Well, I don't look at it that way.
Yeah, I do. But that was very nice of you to return those items to me. What's going on, everybody? So my dad and I are meeting up because we are strategizing for a big upcoming event that we got coming up here at next month, right?
That's right, 28th of January.
You want to tell everybody what this is? What's happening on the 20th of January?
20th of January is going to be a big celebration day. 20th of January has been in the planning for about 2 years.
Long time.
Yeah, it's been a while
time.
to do that. I'm going to go up to South Dakota and have an opportunity to go to an open range, partially on a reservation, where I've had the opportunity to find a gentleman who I'm very excited to be part with, and he is the fourth generation of raising buffalo in his family, and we have scheduled a buffalo hunt. And so we're going to be going after the largest mammal in North America, history beyond all histories. And I have been preparing for this personally by ordering meat from him that I've been eating for the last year.
It's good meat.
From Heritage Bison Ranches.
Yeah, these guys know them. We've been cooking, we cooked their, what was it, the ribs. We cooked the tongue, we did a tongue video.
That's
we
right,
actually
we
did
did
a heart video, but we never, I don't think I ever published it.
I happen to have buffalo short ribs in my refrigerator.
That's good.
It's going to be snowing today. It's going to be really cold, but I'm going to be outside cooking buffalo short ribs.
Well, I'm going to have to come back later then.
Just for the idea of gnawing on the bone. I'm
Yeah.
just looking forward to this.
Mm-hmm. So, I figured we could talk a little bit about the hunt that's coming up. So I'm going on this with him. I'm going to film the whole experience, and it's going to be pretty awesome. So I'm pretty excited about it personally because, you know, we've read so much about buffalo hunting, the two of us, right? We've read all the old primary sources from, right, what was that, the Myers book on the buffalo harvest, which is fantastic. And then you got like Steve Rinella's book on what is it, American Buffalo, but on his buffalo hunt up in Canada, I think it was. It's such a big part of American history, right? Like of Western history. It's a big part of Native history.
And it's part of your history too. You just may not know that. My father and I used to spend lots of time going places and doing different adventures, literally kind of around North America and Canada and those kinds of areas, and I always enjoyed that. One of his great desire was to do a buffalo hunt.
Yeah.
He'd head out to Yellowstone and he would love to drive through and see the buffalo and all of that. And it was just something as a passion for him. And so I'm kind of doing it for a couple of reasons. One is because my father always wanted to do it, and I want to make this part of my bucket list, make sure I have that adventure under my belt. And then, of course, the other reason is because I have things to pass down as part of my legacy to other members of my family, and I just want to make that happen. So I've been researching this for the historical aspects of it. I'm ravenous at that. I cannot wait to learn more and more about buffalo.
We should say too that you're hunting this thing with a period appropriate rifle as well, right?
That's correct.
You're using the, what is it? Is it 76?
4570. 4570 I had made in Italy a little over a year ago. I wanted to use it because this was the period correct rifle that was used. My father had an original rifle, but it was sold off, and I wanted to have an opportunity to kind of recapture that. So I went to them and told them what I was looking for. I told them I'd like to make it out of curly maple, which is something they normally didn't do, but there was a Western version, and history shows us, of that, and that's what I want to use.
I think people saw it, if people watched the Tales of the West video,
Oh, yeah.
Because I think or not Tail, sorry, the Test the West.
Yes.
Right, where you shot it. And by the way, if anybody's wondering why we're sitting so close, one, of course, we love each other, but two, we're trying to get into the shot. So if you're like, those two are pretty close, that's what's going on there.
We are close, really.
We are. But is it an 1876 Sharps? Is that the model?
1874.
74. Okay, so it's a 74 Sharps. So that's
Some might remember it as Quigley Down Under, the Australian movie.
Great movie.
That was put together, and that's kind of what we're using is this one. It's made for long distance shots.
Yeah.
Over 1,000-yard shots, which I had hoped perhaps that might be something I might also add to the adventure. But as I've discovered in working out with the gentleman who has the ranch, he's indicated that he would like the shot to be made in less than 100 yards.
Okay, so a lot closer.
That's a lot closer.
Well, that brings up a good point. So, because you're not shooting, because like historically they'd shoot for the lungs.
Just so that you know, that takes about 3.7 seconds for a buffalo to reach you at that distance. Just so that you we try to calculate those things out so we know what our chances are in all of this. And it's a great motivator, to make sure that you understand what you're trying to do and that you want to make an accurate shot as possible.
So historically, they would shoot it like they called them the lights, which are the lungs, or the heart, right? One of the two. But obviously, you want to be able to dispatch this animal as painlessly and quickly as possible.
That's very important.
You're also moving close up to do the spinal shot is the goal, right?
That's correct. I had thought that we would do a shot that would be the lung heart type shot. Yeah. But the chances are for an animal so large and so strong, so powerful, and the way that they're constructed and built, that sometimes the shots that might take another animal would not work on a buffalo.
Yeah.
And so in talking with the rancher, we said we want to do something that's ethically good, and at the same time to dispatch the animal in a way that is as humane as possible.
Yeah.
And so he said that what we'd like to do is then to do what's called a spine shot. So from in back of the horn, that it would be 6 inches in back and a shot would be made there. And that should, dispatch the animal at that particular point.
We should talk, because some people might hear this, so a couple things. So some people might hear this, and you mentioned the humanely, ethically, etc. I want to make sure that everybody understands. So when you're hunting buffalo, kind of quotation marks hunting, right? Because in a lot of ways, it's more of we're harvesting the buffalo opposed to hunting it. I mean, you are hunting it, but don't get me wrong, like, they're big sort of creatures, and it's I think there's a 1800s newspaper article talking about how hunting buffalo is like hunting Highland cattle, is how the guy put it in like a Dodge City newspaper. Obviously there's dangers and things involved with hunting buffalo, but that's kind of how he put it, because they're rather docile, and so on and so forth. But I think a big part of this too is, we're procuring, 1,200 pounds of meat, roughly?
Yes, about a 2,400 to 2,600 pound animal.
Right, so roughly like half, a little bit more or less, somewhere around there, we should get out of?
That would be, about that.
Okay.
Correct.
So, first of all, we're eating this thing, right? We're going there to get the meat. That's what the hunt is about. So we're getting 1,200 pounds roughly of meat, which is pretty awesome. It's going to feed, it's going to feed your family, including me and my family, now that I have a son, right? We're going to be sort of spreading the wealth and feeding our whole extended family with it, which is important.
And we've been eating meat. We've been eating buffalo meat in our family for a couple of years now.
Yeah, we eat a lot of it.
We love it. We enjoy it, and we've got a taste for it. And we just like the preparation of it. We like the lean quality of the meat itself, not as much fat that's in it. And we just think that's really a great piece. And I'm looking forward to it because I have. The reason I'm harvesting this is because I want, as we've done in all of our lives, is that whether it's a moose or a caribou or whatever it is, we eat that meat.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like paying respect to the animal itself. Like I said, I've spent years kind of looking at buffalo, reading anything that's out there, watching videos to learn about the kind of, I hate to say the persona, but the personality of a buffalo. Sure. And how interesting they are. And also, I want to go back to a statement that you made a few minutes ago where you said they're kind of docile. that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I shouldn't say docile because I know enough to know that they're
Mark
definitely
this
not.
word. Okay, mark this word
They're definitely
docile.
not docile.
And then go look on YouTube for any docile buffalo who suddenly decides that you're in his territory. Yeah.
Yeah, docile is not the right term. It's more of, in the 1800s, they'd laugh about, say, the difference between buffalo hunters hunting a buffalo compared to, I don't know, whatever, like a grizzly bear or something, right? Like, they're different. Or hunting like a bighorn ram, for instance, right? Like, it's a different type of hunt. It's a different level of, say, arduousness or what have you. But the point being is, you know, like, you call it a hunt, you call it a harvest, call it whatever you want, but like, we're going up there to get a ridiculous amount of meat. And I know that some people would say, well, you can just buy buffalo meat, right? But, and we do, clearly. Like, we go up and we buy buffalo meat. But the difference here is you're still subbing out all this stuff to somebody else, right? So like going and harvesting, and I think this is important, and I'm a firm believer in it, but I think being part of that process, opposed to simply buying your meat, I think gives you a greater appreciation of that animal as well. Like,
We've talked to some of the videos before about moose hunts and some of those that we've done. And the experiences that we've had with the kind of Cree Indians and others in Canada especially. And I think it goes back to Native American spirituality, that they see that buffalo as a kin and part of their spiritual heritage. And it's been interesting that wherever you go in Canada, in the West, you know, Newfoundland, but any place that you go, there's a real kinship to the animal that you choose to harvest, and that you respect that animal for giving it its life.
yeah, and you spent your life hunting up there.
Yeah, and if you've ever spent
Hunting
the time,
with, like, Bill Ritchie, the Cree.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you go there, you understand that part of the process is you go over and you honor that animal. That animal has offered its life for you, and it's very important for you to do that, I believe, with the spirit of the animal, and I believe very much in that kind of thing. And I think it's critically important that you do honor that as part of a hunt, and I plan to do that with this animal also.
There's a European hunting order called the Order of Falconut, which has been around since, I think, about 1,000 years, and that it's just, you know, it's like an old European hunting sort of, I don't know what you call it, group or fraternity, if you will, but very similar beliefs, obviously. So I think a lot of these beliefs of honoring the kill is, you know, goes back to, I think it all harkens back to primal society and the appreciation that one has for the procurement of the resources. I think it's funny, there's a great author, we actually interviewed him on the channel, Randall Eaton, who wrote several books, but one that I really love is From Boys to Men at Heart. But he talks about how, he says everybody should visit a slaughterhouse once in their life. And he says that if you visit a slaughterhouse, then you'll become a big advocate of hunting. Because he says, he talks about like the terror and just the murder of the slaughterhouses, right? Like animals screaming, like pigs screaming at basically what's happening in there. And it's just mechanized slaughter. Right?
I went there once, I'd never go back again.
Yeah, but think about the difference, and this is what I love about this idea of this buffalo hunt, is you're harvesting an animal on 5,000 acres of open prairie, you know, in the middle of winter. Like you're taking the time to drive all the way up there to harvest this thing and to be part of that process, opposed to, you know, you sub it out to other people. And I think people just don't think about it. Like you buy your meat, it's wrapped in cellophane, and you're just like, oh great, it's meat, right? But you don't think like, that's a living creature. Like you're not involved in the process of that. You don't see the life extinguished. You just eat the meat and you're like, great, that was good. But you don't think about where it actually came from.
And part of our process was to see that it's ethically sourced. Yeah. I mean, we've done that before. Where
and you should, by the way, if you want to mention the bull that you're targeting, which I think is pretty cool as well.
The bull that we're targeting is called a bachelor bull. A bachelor bull is a bull that is older. It's a bull that has lived its life to the fullest. In buffalo culture and in buffalo kind of husbandry, those buffaloes then are ostracized from the herd. They're no longer part of the herd. They're separate from the herd. Some of that they talk about as kind of a premonition for the oncoming of death, and how, we see in some cultures where when the person gets so old they wander off by themselves and and then die, and it's like off to the sunset. Well, there's similar to that in the buffalo animals themselves, is that they go through this process, especially with the older bulls. There's usually called a herd bull, and there's usually one or two of those animals, no more than that. And then those animals are kept there in order to propagate the species, keep it going. Person we're going to, he raises buffalo not only for food, but he also sells it to other people who are also starting up herds or adding genetic line to all of that. So this bachelor...
And you got to expand that line too, real quick, by the way, because that number was reduced so low in the late 1800s that now you have to be very particular with kind of expanding back out. Like, you can't just inbreed everybody. So like, you've got to be like constantly moving animals here and there in order to mix up that bloodline.
When you do your research, you see the number of people, younger farmers and others, who are starting up in buffalo herds. For a while it was called buffalo cattle. They would mix cows with buffalo as genetic base or whatever. But going back to the original buffalo itself, that's the piece. And that's why you find all these people who pride themselves over that. He had a sales event here in November. Once a year, they bring in all of the buffalo, a roundup. It takes them a month to bring these animals in. All they do is bring them in, run them through, weigh them, and then let the animal go back out again. So they don't touch that animal for a year at a time. So they're
awesome.
Really wild.
And this is on
they're out
5,000 acres, right, of prairie, which is ridiculous.
And in that area, there's not a lot of 5,000-acre fences, so it's kind of a wander area.
Yeah, it's like
he has.
It's in like northeastern South Dakota. It's close to like the North Dakota border. Right?
Yeah, he has two herds divided by a large lake. There's the north herd and the south herd, and they remain separate. The animals do, and he maintains those, keeps guard and watch and all those kinds of things, etc. But the bachelor is the one. But the bachelor is the one who. That he looks forward to saying to people, if you want to source one, and ethically that's what we're looking for, one that will not leave an impact with the herd, one that done in a humane fashion will just be part of the reverence of the life of the animal itself. That's the bachelor bulls. And he happens to have a couple of those. And so he said that's what we'd want to look at. He doesn't entertain hunting. He doesn't go out and try to find people to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, you just can't go up there and shoot a cow.
No. It's really interesting. Right. There are places that do that in so many states.
I would imagine that some people want to do that.
Yeah, and the part of their language is come hunt a buffalo with us, and we'll put it in a pen and run it around, and you can shoot it. And for the next 6 days, you can drink beer, and you can have yourself quite a party up here, and we'll feed you, and we'll do all kinds of stuff, and then you can tell people whatever you want to tell them.
Right.
And so one of my main things for the last few years has been trying to find someone who will allow me to have a hunt that would not cause for any kind of interaction with other people. It's not one where all of a sudden you're in a fenced-in area and you're trying to take this animal.
Right.
Part of the goal of this is to be able to approach an animal starting at about 300 yards and then crawling and just kind of hanging out and get as close as you can to the animal itself. I asked him, I said, do you have a lot of trees? He said, no trees. What do you have? We have a lot of rocks, he said, and tall grass. This is all prairie.
Yeah.
And all of that just adds for me of the feeling of the hunt itself. I was saying before, when we were in Canada and places like that, sometimes we'd have animals would come. Sometimes an animal would come and they would have a calf with it or something. And of course, that would be no, we don't do that. Or we'd find a young bull or something like that. No, we don't shoot those because they have a life expectancy. They're moving on beyond that. What we're looking for are those animals that sometimes have just reached the pinnacle. There's not much left for time-wise. Sometimes they have battle scars, and they've been through it. And those are the kinds of ones, we'll pass up the others. And sometimes that means not taking an animal until we find exactly the animal that we feel ethically fits what we want to do. And brings honor, I keep saying this, but it's absolutely true. Bring honor to the spirit of the animal itself. And that's what we're all about. For me, harvesting a buffalo is really kind of a spiritual experience. I'm doing this as part of my legacy to kind of fulfill what my father and I had always talked about, passing it on to my family members to talk about there was this time when I want to feel like I'm part of that situation. Not of the people who are out there shooting thousands of buffalo at a time, but I'm out there for the people, especially out of the Native American side of it, you know, who honor that buffalo, who everything came from that buffalo. Everything about it meant life, you know, and then when we hear these stories about the government and other soldiers saying, let's kill off the buffalo, and that way we'll surround the Indians and we'll be able to put them back in their position they need, the Native Americans. And my reaction is, no, no, no. So I don't side as much with the buffalo hunters who sat on the hill and shot thousands of buffalo and left their carcasses. My thing is the appropriateness of siding with the Native American and that Native American spirituality and honoring of that animal. I think that's what it's all about.
And I think that's cross-cultural, the honoring of that.
Yeah. And then you take pride, you know, pride in what you were able to do and how you fit into that natural cycle, you know, the circle of life. I mean, you come, you leave, and all of those kinds of things. Yeah, I've tried to spend as much time as possible in researching the history, and you've been helping me with that, looking at some of the prospects of what that looks like. I've been reading books, Ranella's stuff, you know, over, oh my goodness, about the immensity of the animal and its unique characteristics and its involvement.
How many hours of buffalo documentaries and videos do you think you've?
Oh, thousands. There's no other way to say it. You know, if you want to be honest with you,
I believe it.
My wife goes to bed at night, and what she'll do is she'll have some book she wants to listen to, you know, whatever. But it's so funny because after she goes to bed, then I flip it over and I start listening to some new thing about buffalo. Yeah. Because I dream about those things. I really do. I think there's a spiritual connection with all of that, and I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to make this the hunt of a lifetime. And then to move on to other hunts that may be.
Sorry, battery shut off on the camera there.
Happens.
All right. So, yeah, we're just talking about what honoring the animal, which is important. Oh, and the other hunts you were talking about going on. Do you want to tell anybody some of your ideas yet?
Sure. Thinking? Yeah. I was talking to you a little bit ago that, you know, I always like to have this thing of, you know, when you get one, what's the next vision that you've got? What's the next piece out there that you're looking for? And so years ago, my father and I spent a lot of time in Canada and bear hunting. We love bear hunting, and I always loved bear hunting. I think that was a great piece of my background, and I want to have an opportunity to go back and to take you guys with me, so that I get to experience you all in that moment when you're out in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly this bear, the great black ghost of the forest, comes out and suddenly is present with you at that moment. So I'm looking for that. So that's one of the things I want to do. And the next thing is, I've already started doing a little research, little background, little storytell, and everything about muskox.
I like it. I think it's an obscure animal. I hear that the meat's really good, and you get a lot of it. I got high hopes for this, and I like that too. I think Ranella, if I remember right, Steve Ranella hunted one. He talked about it in not American Buffalo, but one of his other books. He talks about his muskox hunt, which I like the conditions of that. You ever read about how they'll stand in the freezing cold during the storms in like a circle?
That's right.
And they'll all face out. Yeah,
that's exactly right. They do that protection piece itself. There's a group up in Canada of Inuit Indians that you can, they'll provide that opportunity for you. It's what they can do on their own native land. Yeah. And that's the kind of thing I'm looking for.
Yeah, I like the physical test of that a lot, right?
If we can do South Dakota at minus 20, 30, 40 degrees at about a 60-mile-an-hour wind in the midst of a blizzard, if we can handle that, let me tell you, I think it's going to be like paradise, even going to Canada and coming along there.
For what it's worth, I think it's pretty great. Like we've talked about it, just a second ago, but I think when you put in the work to drive, you're driving all the way up there, right, the border of South Dakota and North Dakota, and you're going out into the prairie in January, and you're hunting this thing in its I mean, it's its natural environment, right? Like this is the Great Plains of the Dakotas. Like that's their bread and butter. I think I can't say how much better that seems to me than just imagining the end of your life in like a slaughterhouse, right? Imagine the spike of anxiety, of imagine your what do you call it? Like your adrenaline, like everything. Like it's so unbelievably unnatural. Like the slaughterhouse is an end. Just for what it's worth, like I think if I was a bison, I would much rather go out in my natural environment with a humane way, and knowing, of course, that, I mean, even in the slaughterhouse, I guess, that meat's going to get distributed, but at least the meat's getting distributed amongst the family of the people that went up there and did it themselves, and they didn't just rely on somebody else to do the dirty work.
Oh, no, absolutely. And the process, whether it's skinning, moving all the way through,
Yeah,
I look forward to that.
And
That's part of the ritual.
I'm really hoping as part of the video to be able to skin it and to kind of show some of the other aspects of harvesting the animal, which I'm really pumped about. So I'm really hoping we get an opportunity to do all that stuff, which I think we probably will. So I'm pretty excited.
I think it'd be cool. What I'm looking forward to in all of this is the opportunity to be part of that history and the story. The bison, found themselves really across the United States, places like in Kentucky and other places that, there were some in Florida. I mean, they were so widely developed.
It's crazy when you think about.
Absolutely, there were so many places, and yet part of what we know about them, is the Wild West and those kinds of things, et cetera, and putting that together. But I go back to that again. It was so hard to find a place that would allow for the type of harvesting that I wanted to do. I've always prided myself, whether it's been moose or bear or caribou or whatever, to understand this is their environment and this is their world. Yeah. They're the king of that process. Yeah. What I try to do is to enter into their world and to try to meet them on the playing field, face to face, and to be able to harvest that animal. And there's always that bit of fear and trepidation because you never quite know what the animal's going to do. So there is a risk. And in today's world, we don't risk much. In fact, I don't know if we really value risk. In my era, when I grew up, you valued the idea of being able to hunt an animal like a deer with a bow and arrow. In other words, I'm learning their method, I'm learning their path, I'm learning all about them, and then when the time comes and I choose the animal I want, I harvest that particular animal. I mean, there's something about coming and the stalking of the animal. There's something about realizing in any particular moment that animal has your life in its hands as well as you, and there's something about having the opportunity of that adventure that I think, you talk about going to the primordial self, that's where all of a sudden you go, there have been others, Native Americans for thousands of years, who have harvested these animals with the same fear and trepidation and the same respect for the animal. And that's what I'm looking forward to. All that just gets my adrenaline flowing.
Well, I like risk even in fishing, right? Like that's why I think we both love going up to Canada, because you're struggling, you're fighting kind
of survival.
Yeah, but you're fighting against the conditions from the environment, just, and you're having to work for it. Like depending on when you go, like you're freezing cold, you're soaking wet, or you're sweating your tail off, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you're wet in either environment too, but.
When I was in Colorado, I did a lot with fly fishing. I taught fly fishing classes.
But you
and all
worked
those
for
things.
it, I guess is
Absolutely.
my point. Yeah.
I did fly fishing classes. I taught people how to tie flies, and I did those kinds of things because at that particular point, you learn all about the life cycle of the animal itself, and then you go to try to meet exactly what its feed cycle is with the type of fly that's currently part of the hatch cycle that's going on, and all that just adds for me to the beauty of it all. So for this particular animal, I've created a coat that I want to wear. I've worked on a hat. I have a belt on that I made, with a buffalo on it and buffalo nickels, because this is all part of my preparation for these kinds of things. I've made a sleeve for the gun itself covered with beadwork, because I've tried to do some research on what that looks like and being able to create something almost like that. And a variety of things. As part of mine is to research, find out about what it was, so that I can actually relive, not in that time period, but relive as closely as possible that experience to the fullest. That's what I really want to pass on to my family. You may not be able to taste that buffalo in 40 years, but you may have the opportunity of listening to the story being told over and over again and seeing the artifacts which I've created, which I want to pass on and say,
Sure.
it was there, you know?
Well, it's
it
a
was
fun
part of
memory
that.
too for the two of us to go up there and be part of it.
Oh man, that's what it's all about.
But I would say, you remember the time we went up to that 5,000 acres of prairie and the border of South Dakota and North Dakota in the middle of winter?
I remember when you were a little kid and
to find this old bachelor bowl. But here's the thing: the fact that I love the idea. Like, I love the meat aspect, knowing that thing is going to feed us for so long. I'm envisioning all of the steak, the burger, the chili, all the food. And with meat prices, here's the other thing. Like, meat prices are so crazy right now. The cost of meat going up. I'm so pumped to have this trove of protein heading into potentially a recession or
and we
whatever's
like
coming.
it. It's delicious
Inflation.
and it's healthy, and we love to do the healthy thing.
Yeah.
And it's all part of that. And I think that's just all part of this. I mean, when's the last time that when you went to the store and bought a steak, you thought to yourself, I wonder what animal this came from? I wondered about it, you know, except you buy a steak, you eat a steak and consume it and you're done, you know? But when you have that connection, that's why, you know, you hear people say, well, if you're going to resource somebody from the farm and they're going to raise an animal or whatever, meet the farmer, find out about how they raised it, get their ideas about it, you know, and then you pass that along as part of your decision making yourself. It was all part of that Native American piece, which whether it was a corn or whether it was grain of some kind, whatever it was they harvest, it was all part of that story. It was all part of that cycle of life itself, and they honored it, and that became very much who they were
I was gonna
and
say,
is today.
what's interesting is even with things like grass-fed beef, or even, I guess technically, some ranched bison that are prairie raised or like pasture raised, right? That they'll eat grass, but then they'll put them somewhere usually to fatten up for the last couple weeks, like on grain, before they ship them out. So even if you're ordering, like if you're buying like grass-fed beef, a lot of times it's grass-fed up to a particular point, and then it's stuffed full of grains, and it actually can change the nutritional content. Like if you have sensitivity to grains or any reaction to like corn or things like that, and all the things that was put on the corn to grow that corn, what is it, glyphosate, things like that, which is not good.
Oh
chemicals.
my goodness, all those kinds of things.
But the animals eat that stuff towards the end. And I think what's cool about this one is this is born and raised prairie from beginning to end. Like, you're not going to get anything
What
pure.
does it eat? Grass. What does it drink?
Well,
water. That's where it goes. I got a couple of guys that I know who what they do is they raise grass-fed beef. And they talk about the kinds of grasses they grow. They talk about what's available to the animals. They talk about raising the animals itself. Then they harvest and then they sell the meat. But when you talk to those people and you go out there, they'll show you the animals. They're so proud of what they've been able to do and how it's all sourced so well and so beautiful. And one of them always says to me, he goes, you know, I just don't sell you meat, he said. I gift it to you because that's what it was. I've seen it as a gift to me, being able to raise it from birth and then bring it along and then to offer it to you as part of that. And you don't normally get that with other people, but there's something about when you see someone honoring an animal like that, whether range for chickens or whatever it is, there's just something special about that adds a new dimension. That's the reason why sometimes we talk about buying organic foods and meats and those kind of things, or whether it was grass-fed or non-penned or free range, that kind of thing. I like that. For me, that just says there's something above and beyond where there was an honoring of the animal itself, and I feel privileged, and I look for that kind of thing to continue. I think that spirit becomes part of my spirit. That's the Native American piece. I eat the buffalo, and the strength of the buffalo, all those things become part of me, and that's who we are. And I know that may sound kind of strange for some people, but it may sound strange for us now in the last 100, 200 years, but since the beginning of time, that in essence has been the key link between harvest of animals, between the ethical sourcing of animals, and how ecologically they fit into the plant. Where you just don't kill an animal for the fun of killing. It's part of that process of understanding and living it out, and then taking that on.
Yeah, I think there's a famous line. I think it's Ortega. It's in his book, but he talks about how you kill in order to have hunted, but you don't hunt in order to kill, if that makes sense, right? It's about the experience and the purpose of what you're doing.
I am who I am today because of the times that I've spent in the wilderness, in the adventures, with even sometimes being on the edge of mortality, where sometimes the bears have reached in and got me. All right, exactly. And that's all part of, you might call it primal experience, but I think it's all part of who we are inside, and coming to grips and being able to touch base with that. When you do that, I think I live life to the fullest. I think I experience life to the fullest as I want to live that life. And I appreciate the opportunity of being able to do that.
There's a reason, think of those caves in France where they find all the old cave paintings. It's all animals, right? Like there's, I think, a deep level ingrained.
European buffalo, the woodland buffalo.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that honor's kind of ingrained kind of in early man for the hunting and for, for obviously everything that came out of it. It was life procuring that.
Yeah, and for
that
some people,
sustenance.
they've
And a lot of people don't do it anymore today.
Absolutely, they don't. And
I think it's
because of
important
that,
to be part of the process, and I think it's going to be just an absolutely awesome hunt. And so next month, January, we're
next
heading
time we talk to you, I want you to go back and hear about that docile thing he said a few moments ago, because I'm going to show you what docile means. Okay, and I'll have the stretcher stop on the way to the hospital, so I can just say that to you.
I shouldn't. I apologize. Large grazing animals, not necessarily docile. There's a good book.
The largest animal in North America.
No, hey, there's a good book called White Hunters by this guy named Brian Hearn, and it's about African safari hunts. But it's crazy. Their buffalo that they have there, not bison, right? But
Right.
their buffalo, and we know the difference. But
Cape buffalo, right?
in most places in America, who actually, if you talk to people who are around bison, they call them buffalo, right? Like I lived right next to the Buffalo Ranch. It was called Buffalo Ranch, right? The road was Buffalo Road. Like we call it buffalo, we know it's bison. But
And the cool thing is when you say to people, bison, and they go, bison? Why do you keep saying bison? Because
yeah, usually it sounds more ostentatious to say bison. In that book, it's interesting how unbelievably dangerous buffalo are in Africa, right? Amongst and all these other things that they're hunting. It's crazy. It's worth reading it if you're interested in knowing how unbelievably dangerous those hunts could be. It's really cool, actually. But anyway, so yeah, we'll see you guys in January. We're gonna do this hunt, and we'll make sure we record everything. See you guys next time. Thanks.
How'd that do?